Hello and welcome. I think we have about a minute until we start, or less than. Just wanted to make sure this was all set up for us to do our 45-minute workshop on EFT and drawing. So we might get started. So welcome everyone. If you're watching this live on Whole Health Project, or if you're watching it a little later, welcome to you too. So my name is Tessa, and for the next 45 minutes I'll be offering a workshop on the emotional freedom technique, often known as EFT or tapping, and drawing. And the idea behind this workshop is I thought it could be useful for us as another tool to attune to feelings that may have surfaced or perhaps resurfaced at the moment. And in a way, this helps to then reduce the intensity of some of the feelings around things like uncertainty and change. And again, I thought it was particularly relevant at the moment, given what the world is, or it is how it is at the moment. So we're all going to be experiencing so many different feelings, so many different sensations and thoughts at different times. So I thought this could be a useful and creative offering. So just on that, don't need any experience with drawing or creativity at all, not at all. So please keep that in mind. This is not about a art lesson or art skills. So some of you might be familiar with this technique of EFT, and some of you might have watched my intro to EFT a couple of weeks ago through the Whole Health Project. If you didn't, that's fine. I'm going to revisit some of the procedures anyway as we go. But just before we get started, just a couple of notes on some of the material I might be talking about or visiting today. Might be a little bit activating, perhaps even a little bit triggering for some of us, which is really normal. It's very normal. Just to invite you to access some of those resources that you might already have in place for yourself. Just if you're noticing that some feelings are coming up, or some sensations, or maybe there's almost like a bit of a tendency to want to shift or tune out. Again, that's really normal and that's okay. Sometimes strategies around things like recentering or grounding can be useful. So for example, if you're sitting on a chair, you might notice your feet on the ground, or maybe you're noticing your back resting against either the chair or whatever it is you're sitting on. Another really useful strategy around recentering is to maybe just gaze around the space that you're in, just to notice 5 things you can see, 5 things you can hear, and 5 things you can feel. So feeling being something like feeling your feet on the ground, as an example. Okay. It can be also useful to have a contact or a phone number of someone that you trust and feel safe with, just to reach out and check in with if you need to. Okay. It's really important that we look after ourselves and each other, now more than ever, actually. So just briefly, a little bit about me. I am a trauma-sensitive therapist and yoga teacher, and have been offering therapy to children, young people and adults for about over 14 years now. And clients that I've worked with have accessed therapy for a variety of reasons, but some of the things might be around chronic stress or anxiety, domestic family violence, sexual assault and exploitation. So in the effects and the impacts of some of these situations and circumstances. I have completed my level 1 and 2 training in EFT, so in this therapeutic approach, with a wonderfully skilled woman based here in Australia called Kadin. If you're ever interested in doing any training, I'd highly recommend her. I believe she's doing a lot of training online now, so she will be accessible online. So I've used this technique of EFT and combining it with drawing for some time now, both personally and professionally. And I've found it really useful, really effective and very healing actually. Because I find it's a really gentle technique. It's quite simple, so you can practice it in your own time. And which I think is actually quite empowering to have a resource that you can practice whenever you need to call on it. And just to say as well that if during this workshop or perhaps after, if there are some things that you would like to maybe explore a little further, I'd really recommend getting in touch with a trained and skilled practitioner in this to explore this, if that's what you would find useful. Just two more things before we get started. You might notice that from time to time I might gaze down to the side. It's just because I'm keeping an eye on our time, and also I've made a couple of notes just to make sure that we get to everything that we can today. So if you notice me gazing off to the side, I'm just keeping an eye on the time for us. And there may be moments where you might hear a couple of peeps from my cat. He's just at the moment completely asleep on the sofa, but I suspect by the time we finish today, he might be ready for his dinner. So you might hear some little meows coming through at one point. Okay, so during the workshop today, I will do a quick revisit of some of the elements of EFT, and exploring using this technique with drawing. And as I said before, as a resource to really tune in to ourselves at the moment, and to look at reducing some of those feelings associated with things like uncertainty and change and confusion and everything else that can go along with uncertainty. We'll go through, as I said, we'll revisit the sequence so we're familiar with that. We'll do a practice, and I'll try to make sure, that's why I was quite keen to keep an eye on the time, I'll try to make sure that there's some time for questions or comments, but feel free to type anything into the comments as we go, and I'll try my best to keep an eye on that. So what you'll need for today, if you haven't got it with you already, is some blank pieces of paper, so a couple of pieces of paper, some pens, pencils, crayons, whatever you have handy, a quiet space for 45 minutes, and also just wondering if there could be an offering to yourself here for some self-compassion and non-judgment, because as I said before, this technique using drawing, it's not about what your drawing ends up looking like. Because sometimes when I mention it to people or to clients, they think, oh no, I can't draw, I'm not creative at all, and that's really okay. That's very okay. And that will become more apparent as we continue on. So for those who aren't familiar with EFT and what it is, so EFT is seen as this combined technique of Eastern psychology and Western psychology. Okay, so the idea is that, and what we know more and more about now, is that the emotional and the physical aren't separate. How maybe previously we might have been more inclined to try to separate the two. But we know now that when we experience things like a stressful event, a challenging moment, our bodies react automatically. We might start to sweat, we might feel a bit shaky, our heart rate increases, our breathing changes. So they're all signals that we're experiencing something like a stressful or challenging moment. So So EFT can be really useful and very effective in terms of helping us regulate what we are experiencing. And it's also very useful for a whole range of things, such as, like what we're going to be discussing today, talking about, these feelings and processing these feelings around uncertainty and change. Things like it's useful for depression, sleep disturbances, healing past and present traumas. It can be useful for improving relationships and improving self-esteem. It's a whole range of things that EFT can be useful for. So, like I said before, EFT is this combination of Eastern psychology and meridian knowledge and Western psychology. So the idea here is, or the belief is, that when we experience a challenging or stressful moment, it creates something likened to an energy block in our system, which then can inhibit us from releasing that discomfort and then creating this imbalance or disharmony in our body. Okay, so with EFT, we do name the challenge that we're wanting to work on, and we bring our attention and we attune to those feelings, emotions, or sensations that are present. And then we tap on specific meridian points. So just gently tapping using our fingers on meridian points or pressure points. So similar to the ones used in acupuncture. And so EFT is seen as similar to acupuncture but without the needles, which for those of us who are not a fan of needles, it's a welcome relief. So that's why sometimes it's referred to as psychological or emotional acupuncture. And that the idea is that when we tap on these pressure points, it then reduces and sometimes clears some of those blockages that have resulted from the traumatic or stressful moment that we might have passed through or been experiencing. So then what you might notice is then when you go through the sequence of EFT, when you get to the end, you might then cast your mind back to the original challenge you'd started with. And you might notice a decrease in the intensity of those original feelings. And you might not feel as activated when you cast your mind back. It might feel like things are more manageable. And so in terms of the Western psychology perspective around EFT, there's a lot of research out there now around the effectiveness of this strategy. And so studies are now showing that it is so useful in the reduction of the stress hormone known as cortisol in as little as one session of EFT, which I always think it's phenomenal that's a possibility for some people. So the idea behind this is that while practicing EFT, we're sending signals to our brain that we no longer need to be in that survival mode of that fight, flight, freeze, submit, or fawn response. That might have served a very useful purpose for us at some point in keeping us emotionally or physically safe, but it might not be any longer serving us anymore. And so it is engaging that parasympathetic nervous system of the rest, digest, repair, and restore function for us. So now, why drawing? You might be wondering, why have I got my pens on the table and why have I got this paper? So I've used drawing and expressive and creative therapies as part of my practice for a long time now. And I've seen how beneficial, how healing, how effective it can be for so many people, even those who maybe least expect it. Because often when we experience something, especially a challenging experience or something that we find difficult to articulate, for whatever reason, it might be because things feel too overwhelming to put words to, maybe too confusing or painful or unsafe. So sometimes we really struggle to verbalize how we're feeling and why we're feeling it, especially then in order to try to start to process some of that. So I found by introducing this element of drawing, for example, which is what we're going to do today, it kind of bypasses some of that. You know, it kind of gets us from our, thinking mind to something a little more creative, so we can kind of park all of those stories and words and patterns or scripts that we kind of tell ourselves that sometimes are really useful and sometimes not so much. So that's why I really enjoy incorporating drawing into therapeutic practices and approaches. And so similar to what EFT does, drawing also works towards engaging our parasympathetic nervous system. So sometimes when we start to draw or do something creative, what can start to happen automatically is that things like our breathing shifts, our heart rate starts to decrease. So if we combine the two, it can be sometimes even more effective. And also we can experience the fun and joy of doing something creative. It might have been quite some time since we picked up some pens or crayons and start to draw. I think sometimes, especially for some of us as adults, we think, oh, no, I can't do that. And all these kind of barriers come up, and maybe some of those not so helpful stories we've told ourselves kind of come to the surface. Whereas this is an invitation here to maybe park some of that a little bit, if that's possible today. So, and again, I think I might have mentioned at the beginning, if it's possible, that today when we do a practice, we try as best we can to offer ourselves some of that self-compassion and non-judgment and kindness as we practice this. Because for some of us it will be for the first time. Okay. What I might do now is, before we do a practice, I might just run through the procedure of EFT for those of you who might not be familiar, and then we'll get started on a practice. Okay, so in terms of the procedure, so I'm just keeping an eye on the time here, what we do to start with is we identify the challenge that we want to work on. Okay, so we identify that, and we include in that any emotions or feelings or sensations that we notice and where we might notice them in our bodies. So we start with that. We test the intensity of those feelings. So for some people it's a scale. So for some of you it might be useful to do it like a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of intensity, 10 being the most intense, 0 being non-existent. Other people use something more visual, like little feeling faces, maybe using kind of your hands, in the sense of, well, the challenge felt this big to start with. So you're gauging the intensity of those feelings. And then we create what's called a setup statement. And we repeat this 3 times to start our EFT process. So the goal of this setup statement is to acknowledge the issue we're going to work on, those feelings that we notice, those sensations we notice, the intensity of that challenge. And then we always finish the setup statement with a statement of self-acceptance. Okay, and that can be a little challenging for some of us to name and to come up with. But what I mean by that, for example, is we would always finish with something like, I still accept myself as I am, or I'll be okay. So you'll experiment with what fits for you, and it will make sense when we go through it. So we repeat that 3 times, and then we go through the tapping sequence. So just to remind some of you, if you're not familiar, or if it's been a while since you've done this, so there are some different ways of doing this sequence, but this is the way that I was taught. So the sequence being, we would tap starting on the top of your head and come through your face. So under eyes, nose, under your mouth, collarbones, under your armpits, and I tend to cross my arms. It's just a little easier. Bottom of your rib cage. And then we go through tapping on the sides of each of your fingers, saying parts of that setup statement. Okay? So that was a very quick run through. And then once we finish that sequence, we would take a moment to tune in again to what we notice. Has anything shifted or changed? We would test the intensity again. And we might even, if you wanted to, you could also do another sequence if that was useful for you. Okay? So, I think sometimes the best way to experience this is to do a practice. So, making sure you have in front of you a piece of paper. Again, if it's A4, A3, whatever you have handy. Some different coloured pens and pencils. So I'll be doing this as well, so you might hear some scribbling as we go. Now I'll give you some prompts around this. So just taking a moment to get yourself a little bit set up. Again, making sure you have pencils, paper handy. And what we will do is I will ask you to take a moment, and you can start doing this now, to just check in with how you're feeling and checking in with what is maybe a smallish challenge that you would like to work on today. So I'm going to be using how I'm feeling around this uncertain times and that things are feeling uncertain at the moment for me. That might resonate with you or it might not. So just really checking in, and it's important to use your own words here. So checking in, just having in your mind a challenge you'd like to work on. Okay, so now I am going to invite us to draw for 5 minutes. I'll time us and I'll let you know when we have 1 minute to go, then 30 seconds to go, and then when we're finished. And with the drawing, it could be anything. And I mean, it could be scribbles, it could be shapes, images, whatever your pen decides to do or pencil decides to do when you're thinking of that challenge. Okay? So I'm going to get our timer set up. I want to make sure we have our full 5 minutes. So drawing continuously for 5 minutes. So I won't talk during the 5 minutes unless I'm just giving you a little time cue. Okay? So we'll start now. Feel free as well to change colours as you go for any reason, if you'd like to. we have about 2 minutes left. Just drawing continuously, changing colours if you like for any reason. One minute left. Seconds left. Finishing the last part that you're drawing, and that is 5 minutes. So now I just invite you to take a moment to look at your drawing, what you've created here. Take a moment to tune in to how you're feeling when you're looking at this drawing that you've created. And you can either, so there's a choice here, you can either write down on the page, somewhere on the page here, some of the feelings or sensations that you notice, or maybe just keeping them in your mind, that's up to you. So I'm going to write down a couple of things that I notice here on my page. You don't have to, as I said. And then, now what we'll do is we'll do a process. So we'll do a sequence, okay? Tapping on, so we'll create the setup statement. So when I do the setup statement today, feel free to join in with what I'm saying, if that resonates for you, or feel free to fill in the blanks to what is relevant to you today, okay? So I'll do the setup statement and I'll talk us through what I'll be tapping on. But again, it needs to resonate with you. Okay, so the setup statement we repeat 3 times and then we do the sequence. Okay, and feel free just to join in with the tapping. You don't need to say anything at all either. Okay, so we start by, when we repeat the setup statement 3 times, we tap on the edge of our hands. Okay, you can start with either one. So even though things are feeling uncertain at the moment, and it makes me feel unsettled, edgy, and confused, I feel a shakiness in my stomach, which is about a 7 out of 10. So we rate it. And then a statement of self-acceptance. I still accept myself just as I am. So again, even though, and you fill in the gap. So for me, things are feeling uncertain at the moment. And it makes me feel, so you fill in the gap there. For me, it makes me feel unsettled, edgy and confused. And where do you feel this? So I feel this shakiness in my stomach. And I rate it as being, it's about a 7 out of 10. I still accept myself just as I am. One more time. Even though things are feeling uncertain at the moment, it makes me feel unsettled, edgy and confused. I feel a shaking in my stomach. It's about a 7 out of 10. Still accept myself, just as I am. So now we'll do the sequence. Starting at the top of your head. And feel free just to join along with no words. So we say parts of the setup statement here. So, this uncertainty on the inside of your eyebrows makes me feel unsettled towards your temples, feel edgy underneath your eyes, confused under your nose, feel shakiness in my stomach, under your bottom lip, about 7 out of 10. Into the beginning of your collarbones, just underneath. This uncertainty under your armpit, it's about a 7 out of 10. Bottom of your ribs, feeling unsettled. Go to your fingers, so the edge of your thumb, feeling edgy. Index finger, unsettled. Middle finger, confused. Next finger, the shakiness in my stomach. Little finger, it's about 7 out of 10. Into your other hand, this uncertainty that's around makes me feel unsettled. Next finger, edgy, a bit confused, and I feel this shakiness in my stomach. Okay, so now placing your hands down, taking a deep breath in and out, just noticing how you're feeling. Now with that page that you've just done, the drawing that you've just done, I want you to pick it up and turn it over and place it not too far away from you, but it's face down now. Okay, so you've turned that first drawing over. So you've got a clean piece of paper in front of you, pens, pencils, crayons. We are going to draw now for another 5 minutes. And I will time us. So again, it could be shapes, it could be scribbles, images, drawing continuously for 5 minutes. Okay, so let's start. And again, I will let you know when we have 2 minutes to go, a minute to go, and then 30 seconds. And just like before, feel free to change colour for any reason at any time. We're allowing ourselves here to draw whatever our pen, pencil, crayon is inclined to do at the moment. Just this opportunity to draw continuously for 5 minutes. 2 minutes to go. Got 1 minute to go. Seconds to go. And just finishing up the last bits of your drawing. That is 5 minutes. Okay. So now just taking a moment for yourself, taking a deep breath in and out, moving or shifting or stretching if you need to, if that's useful for you. So now that we've done these 2 drawings, I want you to take a moment now. So you've got your second drawing that you've just done, maybe noticing some feelings that are around now. But I want you to go back to your first drawing and turn it over. And just take a moment to have a look at both of your drawings. So from the first one, what that looked like and what that felt like. And now looking at the second one that you've just finished now. And what do you notice? Maybe there's some differences, maybe there's some shifts or changes. So what I would invite, so actually I can share with you what I have created because what we often notice is there can be quite significant differences between the first drawing that we've done and then the second drawing that we've done after we've done the EFT sequence. So I will share with you the first drawing that I did was this one. I'm not sure if you can see that. And I've got a couple of words on the top. So edgy and unsettled. And actually when I look back at this, it does look a little edgy. And like there's a lot going on and yeah, pretty confused. So that was my first one that I did. Then we did the sequence. So we did the tapping, we did the sequence, and then we drew again for another 5 minutes. And this was the second one I did. So yeah, I don't know if you can see that so clearly. There's still a lot going on, but it certainly feels less edgy when I look at that for me. And it feels a little smoother, you know, the edges are a little smoother. So for me, actually, they look and they feel quite different, you know, from the first one I did to the second one that I did. So I just invite you to take a moment to look at your 2 drawings. And again, what can happen is at the end of your second drawing, so for example, for me, if I looked at this and I was like, oof, there's still a little bit of confusion there, I could go through another sequence. So I could create another setup statement, do another tapping sequence, and then maybe another drawing. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this. And, you know, feel free to keep these or not. It's entirely up to you. Because sometimes it can also be quite useful to revisit some of the artwork that we might have done in particular moments. If you find it resourcing, you know, if this is something that you find really nourishing and healing, then it can be such a great resource and great skill that we can use in so many different situations. So for the one today, we did focus on, you know, I was making mention about how feelings of uncertainty and moments of uncertainty can land and can feel quite different for all of us. So I was sharing, you know, when we did the setup statement, and you fill in those gaps, and feel free to watch this a couple of times over if that's helpful in terms of creating that setup statement. But I really hope for you today that this is something that you can and maybe will take away with you and experiment with in terms of drawing. And you can do as many drawings as you like, and within the 5 minutes, you know, if you fill up your page like I filled up mine, you might want to grab another couple of pieces of paper and continue, and that's okay too. There's lots of different ways you can use this. But I hope you have enjoyed incorporating this therapeutic technique, or stress reduction technique it's often referred to as, and drawing. So incorporating a different element, a creative element, to this practice, and in ways that we can really work around how we do attune and safely attune to how we're feeling, and looking at supportive and gentle ways that we can show ourselves some self-compassion at the moment when things are changing and different and we're adjusting to that, and look at reducing maybe some of those moments where we feel like feelings are becoming a little intense. There's some really useful ways that we can reduce that intensity for ourselves. So I'm just conscious of the time. I think we've got about 1 minute left. If anyone is online at the moment and you have any questions, queries or comments, please do feel free to pop them in the comments section. If not, please do feel free to reach out through the Whole Health Project. If there's anything else you would like to know, any more information about this particular technique. If you have found this helpful today, and if it's possible for you to make a donation, that would be greatly appreciated. But if it's not possible at the moment, that's absolutely fine. You know, please just, I hope you can take from this workshop what is helpful for you and see it as a bit of a gift from me to you. And to let you know that this time, next Sunday, so it will be 3 p.m. Bali time, 5 p.m. Brisbane, Australia time, I will be doing another workshop, 45 minutes, on EFT to improve our sleep. So EFT for better sleep. So if sleep has been something that you would like to improve or get a little bit more of, then please do tune in. In the meantime as well, if you are interested in this technique, and if you missed the intro to EFT, please do feel free to have a little watch of that one. I did that through the Whole Health Project back on the 17th of April. So feel free to take a look at that. And if not, I will hopefully see you all same time next Sunday. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in, and take special care. Make sure, you know, in amongst all of this stuff, you really tap into some of those resources that you find useful for yourself. Okay, you take care. And if you missed it live, it will be up on the Whole Health Project that you can access whenever suits you. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.